This is for the previous presentation from my colleague that I will be referring just in a couple of my slides. Okay, I'd like to show some information on the cost of the mycotoxins. I don't know how many of you are aware of the potential cost of mycotoxins in the broiler production. Just a very quick reminder of molds and mycotoxin contamination. You will get it. Some of the mycotoxin contamination, of course, it's already occurring in the field. At the time of harvest, then we have what we call some of the storage mycotoxins. There are mycotoxins that they will already grow the contamination. They will increase the contamination during the storage. Some of them will not. Some of them will only be produced during in the field. So whatever we get at harvest time will already be the final amount. And then, of course, the storage mycotoxins also will increase during feed manufacturing, feed delivery, and at the farm. Just a very quick reminder. Now, mycotoxin can affect, pretty much a lot of the different feed ingredients: corn, milo, wheat, barley, soya, silage, different byproducts. Now, in the last 3 years, or this can probably now go for the last 5 years, a very important fact is that more than 70% of feed was contaminated with at least one mycotoxin. Okay, more than 70% of global samples that they were tested, they were contaminated or at least one mycotoxin. But actually, more than 50% were contaminated with more than one mycotoxin. Not just one, but more than one mycotoxin, and this is especially important. Now, why do we have the majority of the feed samples, contaminated with more than one mycotoxin? Because basically, as you can see here, different mycotoxins, will be produced by the same fungi, and at the same time, there are fungi species that will be able to produce more than one different mycotoxin. So the key point here is that in nature, normally you will not find only one mycotoxin, you will find more than one, okay? Now, of course, that will depend on what you test for, and of course, normally there will be one mycotoxin that will be the major contaminant. But if you do an overall screening, you will find that your sample is contaminated with more than one mycotoxin. I put this slide I have some data from Brazil. Brazil, of course, being one of the main exporters of corn and wheat, but basically corn to different parts of the world, and they are actually one of the countries that they are more upfront in terms of mycotoxin control and mycotoxin monitoring, of course, because of their weather conditions. Unfortunately for them, they are very prone also to mycotoxin contamination, and the LAMIC laboratory, which is the government laboratory for Brazil, they do an excellent job in terms of not only monitoring the different feed and feed ingredients for mycotoxin, but also to do in vivo testing for the registration of different products in Brazil. And then you cannot see it very well here because of the light, but the main point here is the incidence of the different mycotoxins. You have normally in poultry production, especially, aflatoxin is the one that everybody, aflatoxin is the reference mycotoxin. Everybody knows about aflatoxin because unfortunately has been around for many, many years, But as you can see here, aflatoxin, actually the incidence, the prevalence of mycotoxin contamination by aflatoxin, it actually has been decreasing in the last 14 years in the Brazilian sample. Now, you have other mycotoxins, for example, fumonicin. Fumonicin is a mycotoxin that until relatively recently there was not much talk about it. It had been identified for a very long time, but until maybe 6, 7 or 8 years ago, fumonicin, from the point of view of food production, animal production, was not considered. I mean, there was not really that much talk about mycotoxin. And as you can see here, fumonisine, clearly the trend is going, is going up in terms of contamination. DON, which probably in the case of poultry may not be one of the main players. It affects much more pig, swine, but also, overall going on an increased trend. So basically the basic conclusion of this slide here is that aflatoxin, which will be the most talked about normally, mycotoxin in poultry, has like a tendency to actually go down in terms of prevalence, whether other mycotoxins, in particular fumonisine, is going up. This also, I have some data from Malaysia, thank you to our cooperation with RONMA, one of your companies here, that they have an excellent testing laboratories. What they did, they've been monitoring Malaysia raw material sources. Now, these samples were coming from different, from the local source and also from different countries. Okay, they just took the samples that they were from producers here in Malaysia. And of course, like pretty much everywhere else, not only you produce your feed ingredients locally, but you also purchase from different parts of the world. And this is also to confirm they had two different kinds of analysis. Here this is the testing done by liquid chromatography combined with mass spectrophotometer, and then this is a more simple analysis, ELISA. The reason I point these two kinds of analysis is because when it comes to mycotoxin sampling, especially in the very last few years, it's become more and more important. If you really want to have a clear idea what your contamination level is, to use the LC-MS combined analysis, as opposed to the ELISA one. The ELISA one is an excellent analysis if you want to have a quick idea of your contamination. It's cheaper, it's faster, it requires much less equipment, so it's an excellent tool to have quite a good idea. But the official and the most proper way to do it is like this, and the main reason for that is for what we call mass mycotoxins. Normally with the ELISA test, you will be detecting the free mycotoxins that is in your sample, okay? Now, there are, in many occasions, what we know right now is that some of the mycotoxins are combined with other molecules, normally like sugar molecules, and they create a molecule, what we call a mass mycotoxins, that is not detected by the ELISA test, okay? And to detect that combination of mycotoxin with sugars, you need the LC-MS type of analysis. But again, here, as you can see here, you cannot see, but this is the DON. As you can see, this is aflatoxin. Aflatoxin, as you can see here, both types of analysis, the incidence is decreasing, but then you have DON that is increasing, and also fumonisine. Fumonisine from 2009. Increasing both from the more official way of the liquid chromatography with the mass spectrophotometer, and also with the ELISA test. So again, the same trend kind of that we saw in the previous slide from Brazil, that the most typical mycotoxin like aflatoxin kind of decreasing in terms of incidence, and as opposed to other players like fumonisine or DON that have been increasing. And like I said, again, most of the positive samples that were tested, they will contain more than one mycotoxin, which, like I said, if you consider where mycotoxin contamination comes from mold contamination, of course, it's not a surprise. So these are the what we call the regulation levels or the recommendation levels, because actually regulated, for example, in the EU, the only actual legal level is the aflatoxin, okay? The others are recommended. And yes, there will probably become actual legal levels very soon, but right now they're still just recommendations, But to give you an idea, if we pull together both from the EU and from the US, if we get the different mycotoxin levels, this will be either both legal or recommended levels, and these other columns are the levels that we've seen in the field that we will already get problems if we have these levels here. And as you can see, they are roughly 4 or 5 times less. And why is that? How can it be that we have already in the field, we see that we need a much lower contamination than what the authorities are telling us that it's recommended or legal limits, and we will already see problems. The main reason for that is because we go back at the number of mycotoxins contaminating our sample. When they do the studies that are done to set up these official recommendations or legal limits are normally done with just one mycotoxin at a time, which is the normal way to do a scientific approach. You test one thing at a time, and well, you decide what's your limit based on that one single contamination. And then, of course, normally also they are done either under laboratory conditions or research funds, which the sanitary conditions and the health status of the flock is normally in a much better condition than normal commercial flocks. Now, as I pointed out before, in nature you will almost never have only one mycotoxin. You will always have more than one, 2, 3, 5 mycotoxins contaminating at the same time. And unfortunately, mycotoxins, they will have a synergism between the different kinds. You can almost combine any 2 or any 3 or any 4 mycotoxins, and they will have a synergistic effect. Basically, the bottom line is that you will need a much less amount of each one of those mycotoxins to create problems. That's the situation that occurs normally commercially. Commercially, not only your flock, their health status and everything will not be that of a clinical research farm, but also you will have more than one mycotoxin at the same time. So then, of course, you need much lower levels than the recommended ones to see problems, to be affected by mycotoxin contamination. Why, when you have mycotoxicosis, you will, of course, what are the different factors that will affect your mycotoxicosis? It will be, of course, the type of mycotoxins, the quantity, the concentration, the contamination level. As I said before, the combination of different mycotoxins, whether you have just 2, 3 more, the age of the animal, in this case the age of the broiler. I will show you some data pointing out how important it is, as of course the species, in this case we're talking about broilers, but depending on the mycotoxin, there are mycotoxins that will affect more. Aflatoxin, for example, will affect poultry, but DON, for example, the most sensitive species will be swine. Time of exposure, at what time, how long the contamination is, how long maybe you're feeding that contaminated feed, and then of course normal, the nutritional and the health status of the flock, and then also there are other interactions from other factors, stress and so on. I like to point out that a little bit similar to my colleague, the previous presentation, most of the time you will get, hopefully, you will get low contamination. You will not get normally a very high contamination. So most of the time it's hard to see actual clinical signs of mycotoxicosis. Most of the time you will not observe really a clear symptom that will give you an idea that you suffer from mycotoxin contamination. But that doesn't mean that it's not affecting your productive performance. So, animals, like I said, animals exposed chronically to mycotoxins, it will affect the major economic losses will be because of the actual mold contamination, the mold that produce the mycotoxins. the cost of immune suppression. Immune suppression is the number one effect of mycotoxin contamination. The cost due to a reduction in production performance because of the mycotoxin contamination, and also the carcass yield and the quality of the carcass will be affected. And then there are also some indirect costs that I will just have a couple of slides. Now, cause of the mold contamination. Of course, the fungi are living organisms. To grow, they need energy. They need, to grow, to reproduce, they need energy. And normally, of course, what they do, they pull that energy from the nutrient content of the grain, in this case, that they are using. So, consequently, our grain has less nutritional value because some of those nutrients are being utilized by the mold. This is normally the fungi will be using, normally the energy, the metabolized energy, and then normally the crude fat will be the ones affected. So this is normal corn, and this is corn with molds during for 2 months, affected with molds at about 25 Celsius. And as you can see here, the metabolizable energy, decrease because of the fungi using that energy to grow, and then also the crude fat content also decrease. So if you have a contaminated corn, you're using it to manufacture your feed, to produce your feed, and you don't take into account that the nutritional value of that corn is lower than your standards, So then, of course, you will have a less of production because you're actually supplying less energy in this case and less fat that normally you will be doing. Normally, protein and of course fiber are not normally used by the fungi. So, like I said, to give you a rule of thumb, it's about 4 to 5% decrease in carbohydrate and lipids because of the use by the molds of the more highly digestible nutrients, with the consequent reduction also on the grain density. Okay, so something to take an idea. Also here, you can see here the different fatty acids in broiler feed. We will take the 3 oleic, linoleic, and linolenic as one of the most representative. Without molds, this will be the percentage. And as you can see here, in all the 3 cases, as we increase the level of mold contamination, we go significantly decreasing the percentage of the different fatty acids. Okay, just to give you some data on the statement from the previous slide. Now, cost of immune suppression. Like I said before, 90.9% of the times when you have mycotoxin contamination, the number one effect will be immune suppression. As a matter of fact, most of the time, that will be almost the only effect that you will have because, like I said, hopefully your contamination will be low. It will not be a high contamination that then you will see maybe organ affection and so on. But you will not actually see it because what you will be getting is immune suppression. The mycotoxins that have a major incidence in the immune system, aflatoxin, ochratoxin, T2, and fumonisine. Again, as if you remember the previous slides, aflatoxin, of course, aflatoxin, ochra, and T2, very common ones, known for many years, in particular aflatoxin for broiler production. Fumonisine, I wouldn't call it anymore a new player, but certainly much more recent than aflatoxin. And if you remember the previous slides, actually going on a higher trend. The contamination by fumonisine going higher than previous years. Now, of course, if you have immune suppression, you have increased susceptibility to the different infection agents. It will affect the resistance to the diseases because of alterations in the defense mechanisms. So you will need, an increase in either antibiotics or antitoxidal, to protect your flock, and then affect the protecting capacity of vaccination programs. Boron, Newcastle, bronchitis. This is a quick idea of the difference. Is a very quick review of the immune system, and how going from the exposure to the virus, or in this case, if it was the vaccine, all the way till developing your antibodies, and these are the different steps on the immune response that you will be affected by the mycotoxin contamination, basically resulting in a much less production of antibodies. So this is something that you have to consider. In many occasions we see, of course, immune suppression. You can have immune suppression by many different factors, not just mycotoxin. Unfortunately, like I said, in most occasions, your mycotoxin contamination is low. You do not detect it, but it's there, and you have an immune suppression, and maybe you have a vaccination program against Newcastle, let's say, and well, your titers after vaccination, your titers are not as good as you would expect. What do? You call Merial, hey, Merial, your vaccine is not working, or maybe you blame your labor. How did you vaccinate the bird? You didn't do it properly. When in reality, what you're having is a mycotoxin contamination, low mycotoxin contamination, so it goes undetected, and consequently immune suppression, and because of the immune suppression, you're not getting the protection from the vaccine that you will expect normally. Okay? So, as I said, immune suppression, normally, what we will have, if mycotoxin contamination, even a low one will give us immune suppression, so it will have increased vaccine reaction, post-vaccine reactions. We will have a poor response to vaccination, and which, of course, to protect the animals without the vaccination, we will need an increased use of antibiotics in the farm. So, of course, the two main symptoms resulting from this will be uneven growth and poor performance. Of course, unfortunately for you, normally you don't go this way. You come from here, you're at your farm, and you see uneven growth and poor performance. Those are the two symptoms that you see. And you can probably name 2 million factors that will result in uneven growth and poor performance, okay? So you see that in the farm, and maybe, just maybe, you will consider that potentially maybe one of your problems is you suspect that you will have mycotoxin contamination. You go, you analyze maybe for 1, for 2. First of all, your sample, you will take a sample. Sampling is very important in mycotoxin contamination because the laboratory is going to analyze not what's in your silo or your feed meal. It will analyze the sample that you take to get analyzed. It's going to tell you the contamination that you have in your sample, not in your silo or in your the laboratory analyzes just whatever you take them. Just to give you an idea, because of mycotoxins not being evenly distributed, across the silo or the feed bag or the feed cargo, normally you will need 1 kilogram of sample taken properly from a proper distribution. 1 kilogram of sample for every 100 tons of feed. So normally you will need to take, at least, if you have like a big silo, something samples of 5, 10 kilograms, it's coming from a big cargo, you will have to be taken to the laboratory 10, 15, 20 kilo samples. I don't know what's the situation here in Malaysia. I can tell you, I come from Barcelona, my company works in the US. I've never seen anyone showing up at a laboratory with a 20 kilo samples to test for mycotoxin contamination. I've never seen it. And quite honestly, I don't expect to see it, So, like I said, unfortunately for you, in most occasions, the mycotoxin contamination will go undetected. Because also imagine that you, like I said, you suspect and you go and you say, okay, you take it to the laboratory, you do a screening. Maybe they would use the ELISA, which, like I said before, doesn't take into consideration the mass mycotoxins. So but still you analyze, and it gives you, 10 ppbs, for example, of AFLA. You say, well, 10 ppbs, the European Union recommends, 20, up to 20, it's okay, no problem. It cannot be mycotoxin. When in reality, maybe you're not testing, but not only you have AFLA, FUMO, DON, T2, OCRA, all of them at a low level, so all of them combined are certainly giving you the immune suppression, and that's actually what is giving you the uneven growth and the poor performance. So unfortunately, like I said, in most occasions, the mycotoxin contamination will go undetected. So uneven growth, poor performance. What do we get normally? Non-uniformity at the slaughterhouse. Also, like I said, post-vaccinal reactions. We will have hair sacs, different mucus. Is there a practical way to evaluate the immune system? You say, okay, I like to know if maybe I'm immune suppressed. Of course, you can do your monitoring in case that of vaccination programs, but is there people, it's actually quite difficult to have an idea of what's the immune status of your flock. One potential way to check is the ratio between the bursa of Fabricius. Of course, the bursa of Fabricius and spleen, two organs, the bursa of Fabricius is very much involved in the immune system. So under normal circumstances, the bursa of Fabricius should be about 2 to 2.5 times greater than the size of the spleen during the first 28 to 30 days of age. This is to give you an idea. These are 21-day-old broilers, and this will be the normal size of the bursa compared to the spleen, about 2 times bigger. This is for in an affected immune system and a compromised immune system, 25-day-old broilers. And as you can see here, the bursa compared to the spleen, they are roughly the same size or even smaller. So this will, if you do some necropsies and you see this picture, you certainly will suspect that you have an immune compromised flock there. Okay, so cost, we've seen the cost because of the mold contamination, less nutrient density of your grains. What's the cost of the production performance because of the mycotoxin? Aflatoxin, again, is the major, the mycotoxin with the most negative impact on body weight gain in broilers, okay? But again, the effect of aflatoxin is much worse when it's combined with other mycotoxins present simultaneously, which is, again, most of the time, Aflatoxin, okra, T2, fumonicin, and DON will affect the feed conversion on an average of 0.05, depending on the different combination of those mycotoxins. And then also AFLA, okra, T2, and fumonicin and DON, it will increase mortality on an average of 0.5% up to 1%. If you have, in this case, like I said, if you have high levels of several mycotoxins. So in this case, to result in an actual increase in mortality, you will need to have high levels of several mycotoxins. The weight, what I was showing you before, the picture of the different carcasses, the aflatoxin, for example, how it will affect the uniformity of broiler weight. If you can see here, the frequency of the different body weights. First of all, the overall weight is lower when you have the aflatoxin contamination. In this case, it was 2.8 ppm of aflatoxin. So as you can see, the average weight is decreased, but not only the average weight is decreased, but also the uniformity is much less in the case of the mycotoxin contamination. As you can see, the curve here is much wider. Here, not only the peak is higher, the weight is actually higher, but the curve, of the different frequencies of the weight is it's much more narrower, meaning that you have a much more uniform flow here as compared to the one with the contaminated dye. You know? This is just to have you an idea of some pictures of the aflatoxin contamination. Also, aflatoxin affecting the pancreatic digestive enzymes. Okay, in this case with a 2.5 ppm of aflatoxin contamination, the different digestive activity of the different enzymes, and as you can see here, statistically about decreasing about 35% of digestive enzymes activity. And of course, obviously, if your digestive enzymes are not working properly, obviously the use of the nutrients by the feed by the broiler will be compromised. Also, bile volume and concentration in the case of an aflatoxin contamination. Again, the volume gets increased, but the concentration gets much decreased. So you will have also a compromise on the quality of the bile salts, so they will not have the emulsification activity needed for a proper digestion. Okay. Weight. When we're talking also about aflatoxin liver, each mycotoxin, depending on the species, will have what we call a target organ. It's the organ that is most affected by that particular mycotoxin for that particular species. You know, in the case of broilers, liver is what we call the target organ. It's the most affected organ in case of aflatoxin contamination. So in this case, like I said, we see here also that when we have aflatoxin contamination, the liver in this case gets increased. You get a more friable, a more dilated liver, okay? And also, if you were checking at the uniformity of the livers in the flock, it will be much more spread, much less uniformity. So the average weight of the livers will be increased, and then you will also have a much more spread uniformity of the livers. That will give you also a tool in the field to detect a potential aflatoxin contamination, even though, like I said before, to actually see a difference in the target organ, you will have normally you will have to have a relatively high contamination levels. You know? Intestinal integrity, when you have T2, fumonicin, and DON, they will all basically cause a disruption in the intestinal surface, and of course compromising the nutrient absorption after the digestion. This is on productive performance. Some of the affections, aflatoxin, for example, you will have a reduction on the weight gain, depending on here at the lower axis, depending on the concentration. These are ppb. Depending on the concentration of aflatoxin, you will have a reduction on body weight at 42 days. So, as a rule of thumb, to give you an idea, for every 1 ppb of aflatoxin contamination, you will roughly get 1 gram of body weight decrease. Carcass yield and quality. If you remember, we were talking the cost affecting the nutrient density, the cost of mold contamination, and the cost because of immune suppression, cost because of production performance, and then cost on carcass yield and quality. Aflatoxin and fumonicin create a major negative impact on carcass quality, mainly because of bruises, hematomas, lacerations that will result in condemnations. A field contamination by these two mycotoxins can generate an average of 0.55% of increase in condemnations. Also, I'm not really sure if it's the case of Malaysia, but there are countries that they will pigment the broilers also, because the market, demands a more pigmented skin broiler. Aflatoxin, T2, fumonicin, and DON will diminish the skin pigmentation in broilers, okay, with a reduction of about roughly of 1 to 3 degrees on the wash color count. And then also aflatoxin, ochratoxin, and again fumonisine increase the liver size. As I said before, the liver will be the target organ for broilers for these mycotoxins, making the liver fat, larger and friable, so it's not possible to sell the liver in many places. The liver is an organ that gets sold, and it's part of the profits of the broiler production. So there is a reduction on liver cells of at least 1%. So all these percentages of decrease in benefits at the broiler production. Why? The aflatoxin lesions, basically because of a capillary fragility, you will have more hemorrhages and everything, and that will decrease the quality of the meat that you are selling. Again, to give you just some data, this is coming from the LAMIC laboratory in Brazil that I was referring to, different based on aflatoxin contamination or fumonisine contamination. The condemnation, and on a control, when you did not have contaminations, they will take it as a reference, 0, and then because of aflatoxin, the legs, the wings, or the breast meat, the increase in percentage of condemnations because of the aflatoxin or because of the fumonisine. This is the reason why do we have the capillary fragility and why do we have some of those bruises and hematomas and everything. The aflatoxin, for example, increases the coagulation time and the prothrombin time, depending, of course, on as you increase the contamination level, you will increase the time on coagulation and prothrombin. Okay? Just to summarize, the friable and fatty liver, because makes it inadequate for sale, the lack of pigmentation. So of course, liver is 3% of body weight, so not only will decrease the body weight that you get paid for, but also the actual sale of the liver will be, of course, compromised. And then again, for quality of the bird that you're producing, a reduction of pigmentation. So these are the economical losses, because of the moles and the mycotoxin contamination. And this is to give you an idea. We did this calculation in a situation. I don't know exactly that the prices will be reproduced here in Malaysia, but this was in 5 Mexican integration to get an idea of the actual cost to evaluate economic losses based on problems from mycotoxin contamination. The price of the chicken, the reference was $2 per kilo, and analyzing the normal contamination in the integrations. This was the average contamination in PTBs, afla, fumo, DON, okra, T2, zearalenone. And this is the range. This was the average, and this was the range that will be normally found in these 5 Mexican integrations. Like I said, remember this number here, the $2 per kilo. So, based on the loss of energy in the feed because of the mole contamination, the loss will be like approximately 1 cent of a dollar. The weight gain, 3 cents of loss because of decreased weight gain. Feed conversion, another 3 cents. Immune suppression, roughly about 2 cents. Cost because of mortality, so decrease health status, 3 cents. And then yield and carcass quality at the slaughterhouse, we get paid less, so 4 cents or US dollar cents. So the total, about 16 cents per kilo of chicken. That's to give you an estimate of the cost of all the different factors, affecting when you have mycotoxin contamination. And I like to finish with some, until now we talk directly by the mycotoxins, okay? Mycotoxins you have there or more contamination, directly they will compromise and it's, well, you can measure the cost on your broiler production. But in some cases, like I said, your mycotoxin contamination will not maybe affect directly, but it will be an indirect effect. This was a study that I thought it was quite interesting that was presented just 2 weeks ago in the World Poultry Veterinary Congress in South Africa. And it was relating, in this particular case, was relating DON and fumonicin on the incidence of necrotic enteritis in broilers. Just a quick reminder of the situation with necrotic enteritis. Normally, you will have Clostridium in the distal gastrointestinal tract, and when it's right there, it's okay, nothing happens. It's in balance with the other bacteria. But your problem is when, because of a lesion or because of different factors, that Clostridium will actually migrate to the small intestine and will colonize the small intestine, in higher amounts than normal, and that's when then you will have the necrotic enteritis. So there are different factors that will create that initial lesion that will favor the migration of the Clostridia from the distal GA tract to the small intestine, where it will produce the necrotic enteritis. So of course, some of the contributing factors for this colonization of Clostridium into the small intestine will be, if you have inclusion of cereal grains rich in water soluble, without the effective enzymes, because that will increase mucus secretion that will favor the colonization of Clostridia. Also, if you have higher levels than adequate of soybean meal, lupins or beans, because they have high levels of oligosaccharides, and chickens do not have the proper enzymes to digest those, but Clostridium does, so it will favor the colonization of Clostridium. And also in this test, in this project that was presented at the World Veterinary Poultry Congress, this was part of a PhD thesis, but right now already Dr. Antonsen from the University of Ghent. What they did is they used 2 different diets, controlled diets, without significant levels of mycotoxins, and then they had a fumonicin contaminated diet that the contamination was 18.6 milligrams of fumonicin P1 and P2 for kilograms of P. Basically, the results, what they saw, it was an increase of sphingolin to sphingosine ratio. This is a very common, this is actually a biological marker for fumonicin contamination. Fumonicin affects the metabolism, the conversion between sphingosine and sphingolin. So normally, this is one of the few mycotoxins actually that by testing the blood, you can actually detect whether you have a contamination because of this ratio. In this case, very important to point out that they did see that the fumonicin was affecting, but they did not see any effect on the body weight. Okay, so like I said, if the contamination was not enough to produce an actual change in body weight, but they did observe that there was a change in the intestinal morphology, basically in the ileum, the bilar height and the crib depth was changed, basically was decreased. The control diet will have 487 micromillimeters, and then as opposed to 397. So basically the intestinal morphology was affected by the fumonicin, and this created, and then also they saw a reduction of lactobacillus colonization on the ileum, as opposed to an increase in Clostridium. So basically what they saw is that fumonicin contamination was creating the appropriate environment situation for the Clostridia to migrate. And not surprised then, This was the results on the incidence of percentage of chickens with necrotic enteritis. They did, of course, they did challenge. This was not naturally occurring. They challenged the animals with both treatments with a Clostridium challenge, and they saw a significant increase on the incidence of necrotic enteritis on the group that had been fed fumonisin. So even though the fumonisin was not, the fumonisin contamination was not able to produce an actual body weight gain, so no visible symptoms, still they did see a significant increase on the necrotic enteritis because of the alteration in the gut status because of the fumonisin. So like I said, just to give you an idea of some other problems that you may have, that you again you may see an increase in necrotic enteritis in your flock. You do not consider, you think you have to change the health status, but maybe your problem is that you actually have, in this case, a fumonisin contamination. Now, when is the most, so how do you prevent, when is the most critical period to control for broilers? Basically the first 21 days of life, because that's when you have the major development of the intestinal system and in the immune system. So, and again, immune suppression is the part that will be more compromised by mycotoxin. And some of the production, some of the practical solutions, of course, cleaning the grains. You can use also hepatoprotectors to protect the liver, which is one of the main organs that is affected. Of course, mold inhibitors, and to protect more contamination, and then also anti-mycotoxin products. You know, again, brain cleaning, liver protection, different ingredients that will give you an increased protection of the liver to protect the effects on the liver, and then again, mold inhibitors and anti-mycotoxin additives. If you select an anti-mycotoxin additive, make sure you check that it's effective in vivo. A lot of the data that they give you will be in vitro data. You need to check the data from your supplier that it works in vivo. The in vitro data is just to give you an indication, but you really need to make sure that you're getting the in vivo data. Hopefully it will be an additive that will give you a wide spectrum of protection, because like I said, normally in nature you will have more than one mycotoxin, and make sure also that you use it at the correct dosage. You know, check what was the dosage that they used for the in vivo trials, and use that same dosage. It doesn't work out like, okay, this was done at 2 kilos, but then if it's very low, you can use it at half a kilo. No, you have to make sure that you're using it at the correct dosage. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Josep. Is there any question? I allow two. For Dr. Josep? Oh, this is a Malaysian style. Normally there is no question from the floor. But I have few, okay, how to overcome this kind of problem, especially mycotoxin in the raw material?
In the raw material, unfortunately, I didn't show the data because of purposes of time, but like I was showing one of the initial slides, in many times you will already have the mycotoxin contamination occurring at the field during the grow before the harvest, and it's almost impossible to destroy mycotoxins with your normal feed treatment. You know, so they are very heat resistant. They resist against heat, against irradiation and stuff. So your easiest practical way is to use an anti-mycotoxin additive, because the treatment of the grain you can reduce. Yes, if you select your grain, you can reduce, but it's very difficult to actually destroy the mycotoxins. The mold is different. Mold, yes, you can, with a good mold inhibitor, you can destroy the fungi, but not the mycotoxins.
All right, thank you, Dr. Josep. Okay, now come to our last presenter, who is Dr. Srijit. Dr. Srijit is from India. Okay, he comes from the what? Ayurveda Limited, India. For his education background, he has mastered in veterinary medicine from India, and then now he's working as international technical manager and always looking after all the technical aspects of the company. I believe it is multitasking. Okay, all right, Dr. Swiji, the floor is yours. Okay, you have 40 minutes of presentation, 5 minutes of question and answer. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Myself is Dr. Josep, and I'm from India. My company, the organization for which I work is Ayurveda Limited. It is a very prestigious organization, one of the leaders in herbal in India. And today, the topic that I'll be discussing is about a novel approach